The state of Florida has now scheduled its 7th execution of the year. But if that lethal injection does take place as planned, the next man in line is Thomas Gudinas, currently 51 years old. His date with death is set for just 14 days later, on June 24th. In this case, it's far from straightforward. The crime occurred in 1994. Reports say the victim's body was discovered in an alleyway near the parking lot of a bar she had visited earlier that night. But here's where it gets murky. Some accounts say the alley was right around the corner from that bar. Others mention a nearby school called Pace. But according to public records, the nearest Pace school is 5 miles from the scene, raising serious doubts about the accuracy of the case details. Unless the school was once located downtown and later relocated, the geography just doesn't add up. Then there's Jeff Ashton, the prosecutor who led the case. The same Jeff Ashton who later became nationally known during the Casey Anthony trial. He stated that DNA was recovered from the victim's thigh. But here's the twist. Thomas Gudinas, the man convicted and sentenced to death, has always insisted that his DNA was never found on the victim and that no one ever tested that sample to check if it might belong to someone else. So what really happened? Let's go back to May 1994. Thomas Gudinas, then just 20 years old, had traveled from North Carolina to Orlando to stay with 2 cousins and a few longtime friends, all of whom grew up with him in Massachusetts. On the evening of Monday, May 23rd, the group gathered in their apartment, drinking and smoking weed. Later that night, around 8:30 p.m., they headed downtown to a nightclub called Barbarella, a spot known for spinning 80s new wave tracks even in the heart of the 90s that night. The bar was offering $5 a Lucan drink draft beer. Since Gudinas was underage, he reportedly used a cousin's ID to get in. Now here's the key part. According to police interviews, Gudinas' roommates said he was with them until about 1:30 a.m., then vanished. But they didn't think much of it. They said it wasn't unusual. The group had left the bar a few times to smoke in the car, and often split up throughout the night. What happened after that is where the mystery begins. In this video, I'll walk you through every twist in the case, conflicting witness statements, disputed DNA evidence, and the long trail of appeals. Did Thomas Gudinas truly commit this crime? Or is the state preparing to execute a man who has always claimed his innocence? Thomas Gudinas never returned to the bar that night. Shortly after he disappeared around 2 a.m., another event unfolded that would later become a key part of the case. At the time, Rachel Smith was also at Barbarella, enjoying the night with her. When they decided to leave, Rachel stepped out first to head to the parking lot, while her stayed behind a few extra minutes to say goodbye to friends. But Michelle had unknowingly walked into the wrong lot. That's when she saw him. The man was crouched between 2 cars, watching her. Alarmed, she quickly turned and made her way to the correct parking area, only to realize he had followed her. The man now just steps behind her, tried to approach. Michelle jumped into her car, locked the doors, and just in time, because within seconds, the man began banging on her windows, trying to open the doors. She would later recall him shouting threatening words and attempting to shatter the glass with his fists. In a panic, Michelle laid on the horn. That noise may have saved her. The man bolted and disappeared into the night. Rachel reunited with her and left without reporting the incident, at least, not right away. But that wouldn't be the last time that man appeared that night. Also at Barbarella was 27-year-old Michelle McGrath, described by her family as full of life. Michelle loved music and the vibrant Orlando nightlife. That night, she had come out with friends to enjoy what the downtown scene had to offer. Around 3:00 a.m., closing time, Michelle said her goodbyes and walked to her car, dressed in black shorts and boots. But she never made it. According to investigators, this was the moment Thomas Gudinas attacked. He dragged Michelle into a narrow alleyway between 2 buildings and closed the metal gate behind them. What happened next was described years later by investigators as vicious and relentless. Gudinas beat Michelle until she lost consciousness, leaving bloody palm prints on the walls as he leaned for support during the assault. The brutality was such that the prints told their own story, one of violence and desperation. Michelle's injuries were devastating. Police found Gudinas' jeans discarded near the scene, along with Michelle's removed clothing. The positioning of her body and the physical evidence at the scene told investigators the final moments were deeply disturbing, marked by control, dehumanization, and a disregard for life that was chilling. Forensic teams would later use this evidence to build a timeline. The alleyway, the palm prints, the clothing, all of it pointed to a single conclusion. Someone had taken Michelle's life in a calculated, merciless way. By the time Barbarella closed its doors in the early morning hours of May 24th, Thomas Gudinas was nowhere to be found. His roommates waited for a while, scanning the area, but when he didn't turn up, they eventually gave up and said, "Let him find his own way home." They got in their car and drove off. But Thomas Gudinas didn't go home. According to the investigation, he remained near the crime scene with the victim's body for hours, lingering into the early morning light. This timeline is supported by two key events. First, Michelle Smith had her chilling encounter in the parking lot around 2 a.m. And then, just after 7 a.m., a woman named Jane Brand, who worked at a nearby school called Pace, spotted something unusual. Jane had arrived early to work when she noticed a man loitering on the school's steps, wearing black shorts. She approached and told him he wasn't allowed on school property. She even offered to open the gate for him, but instead, the man walked over to a wall, jumped over it, and disappeared into the alleyway on the other side. That man, she would later confirm, was Thomas Gudinas. Investigators believe he exited the alley by pushing on the metal doors, leaving behind clear handprints, which crime scene technicians would later collect as evidence. But there's more. Nearby, a homeless man named Colbert Presley had found a set of car keys lying on the ground next to some torn clothing. Presley, unaware of what had happened, was walking around the parking lot trying to figure out who the keys belonged to. That's when Gudinas approached him. He told Colbert, "Those are my keys." Colbert asked for a small reward for returning them, and Gudinas said he'd be back with $50. Suspicious but hopeful, Colbert agreed. Meanwhile, someone had called the police to report a man acting suspiciously peering into parked cars. The call was dispatched to Orlando Police Bicycle Officer John Cesari, who arrived on scene shortly after. As Officer Cesari approached Colbert Presley to question him, a red 1992 Geo Metro suddenly sped out of the lot. It wouldn't take long for authorities to learn that this was Michelle McGrath's car. Some reports state that Officer Cesari jotted down the license plate himself. Others say it was Colbert Presley, who had a clearer view and shared it with the officer. Either way, the plate was recorded. Moments later, Jane Brand, still disturbed by the strange man she had seen on school grounds, turned to speak with Officer Cesari. She told him everything. The trespasser, his jump over the wall, and her growing concern. Wanting to check the area more closely, Jane re-entered the alleyway behind the school. What happened next would become a chilling memory she'd never forget. Just as Officer Cesari remained in the parking lot, a piercing scream echoed from the alleyway. Jane Brand had stumbled upon something unthinkable. Officer Cesari rushed toward the sound, flashlight in hand. When he reached the alley, his beam lit up the ground, and there it was. The body of Michelle McGrath. Forensic investigators were called in immediately. They processed the scene carefully, documenting every detail. Bloody handprints were lifted from the alley wall and from the metal door Gudinas had used to exit. Clothing, personal items, and other key evidence were also collected. What had started as a night out at a popular Orlando nightclub had turned into one of the city's most haunting crime scenes. And it all unraveled from a handful of small moments, a wrong turn into a parking lot, a quiet school employee's intuition, and a scream that broke the morning silence. But was the investigation as solid as it seemed? In the next chapter, we'll uncover what the trial didn't explain, the forensic questions that still remain, and the persistent claims of innocence from the man now facing execution. Nearby investigators found a pair of blood-stained men's jeans hanging ominously close to the alley. Not far from them, they discovered Michelle's handbag, and inside were some of her personal items, including her ID card. But her money was missing. Forensic technicians also recovered DNA evidence from one of the victim's legs. Around 7:30 that morning, Thomas Gudinas returned to the apartment where he was staying. One of his roommates later told police that Thomas was no longer wearing the blue jeans he had worn the night before. Instead, he had on black shorts. They also noticed that his hands were covered in scratches and dried blood. When his roommates questioned him, Thomas claimed he'd been attacked. He said 2 men had tried to rob him, forcing him to remove his pants in the process before he managed to escape. That's how he ended up in the shorts, he said. But the story didn't sit right with them. Later that same day, around 7:30 p.m., Michelle McGrath's red Geo Metro was discovered parked near the Holiday Club apartments on Curry Ford Road. Investigators decided to place the car under surveillance for several days, hoping the person responsible might return, but no one did. He said he'd go back to the car, but he never did. Instead, investigators hauled it away for forensic testing. Inside, they discovered scattered contents, likely from Michelle's handbag. Among them, a bank checkbook. That checkbook turned out to be crucial. Why? Because fingerprints were lifted from it. And those prints matched the bloody ones found near Michelle's lifeless body in the alleyway. Police now had fingerprints, DNA, vague descriptions from two key witnesses: a homeless man named Colbert Presley and a school employee named Jane Brand. But they were still missing the most critical piece of the puzzle: a name. The case exploded in the media. Newspapers, radio, TV. Michelle's brutal murder was everywhere. About a week later, one of Thomas Gudinas' roommates saw the news and turned to him saying, "We were there that night. You disappeared. Did you kill that girl?" According to the roommate, Gudinas chillingly replied, "Yeah, I killed her. Then I assaulted her." At first, the roommate thought it was just a sick joke. But soon after that conversation, Thomas Gudinas fled Florida, headed back to North Carolina. Then came a twist. Remember Rachel Smith? She was the woman who managed to escape from an attacker in a parking lot just 30 minutes before Michelle was killed. When she saw the news, she realized the timing matched perfectly, and she called the police. Her detailed description led to a composite sketch that was soon broadcast across the state. 3 weeks after the murder, Thomas Gudinas' friends contacted authorities and said, "You need to look into him. He looks just like the sketch, and everything about that night adds up." Detectives wasted no time. They traveled to North Carolina, where they found Gudinas already sitting in jail for theft. When they saw him, their jaws dropped. He was the spitting image of the sketch Rachel Smith had given. When detectives said the name Michelle McGrath, Gudinas immediately stopped talking. He lawyered up, but it didn't matter. Investigators got his hand in palm print sand. That was the nail in the coffin. Even more damning, all three eyewitnesses, Rachel Smith, Jane Brand, and Colbert Presley, positively identified him. In 1995, nearly a year after the crime, a jury found Thomas Gudinas guilty. The vote 10-2 in favor of the death penalty. In court, the judge looked straight at him and said, "You shall be put to death in the electric chair by having electrical current pass through your body in such amounts and frequency until you are rendered dead. May God Almighty have mercy on your soul." According to the Orlando Sun-Sentinel, Gudinas had tears streaming down his face as he heard his fate. Michelle McGrath was just 27 years old. She had 3 younger sisters, and they were incredibly close. A proud graduate of Oak Ridge High School, Michelle had even been crowned homecoming queen in 1984. 10 years later, she was working as a clerk for the Martin Marietta Corporation and studying business at Rollins College. Everyone who knew her described Michelle as generous, kind, and deeply compassionate. She even used to deliver clothing to people living on the streets. Her life was stolen in a senseless act of violence. But justice, though delayed, caught up. If you want more real death row stories, final hours before execution, and justice delivered, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications.